Imagine two of the most ruthless forces in the underworld, one willing to spread terror through bombings and public political assassinations. The other controlling everything from the shadows, manipulating the government without anyone knowing. Medellin of Pablo Escobar or Sinaloa of El Chapo, which is the most violent cartel? A killer who murders you in the middle of the street or one who makes you disappear without a trace? An empire built on public terror or an organization that operates through absolute control? Is violence the only path to dominance? Or is silence the most terrifying weapon of all? Imagine yourself in Medellin, Colombia, in the 1980s. The heavy atmosphere engulfing the city isn't due to the weather but to fear. Here, violence is not a distant concept. It happens right on the streets. In narrow alleys. In broad daylight. A police officer has just been shot dead in front of his own home. A car explodes on the main avenue. The news reports a bombing that shakes the entire city. You know exactly who is behind all of this, the Medellin cartel. No warnings. No direct threats. Everyone understands. If you go against Medellin, you die. Now, step out of Medellin and head north to another land, Sinaloa, Mexico. There are no public bombings. No broad daylight assassinations. Yet the fear here is just as paralyzing. No one dares to speak about the cartel. No one dares to mention the names Joaquin, El Chapo, Guzman or Ismael, El Mayo, Zambada. They know that Sinaloa does not need to assert its power with loud attacks like Medellin. They have another way, a quiet but far more dangerous one. If Medellin uses guns to dominate the streets, Sinaloa uses money to control everything. Police, politicians, businessmen, all could be part of the system without anyone knowing. So, between the two most infamous cartels in the world, which is the more violent organization? On one side is Medellin, a force that once held all of Colombia in its grip, unafraid to wage war against the government, using bombs and bullets to assert its power. On the other is Sinaloa, an organization that has endured and thrived even after its leader was captured. Medellin was a storm that destroyed everything in its path but quickly faded. Sinaloa is an underground current, quietly spreading and growing stronger. Is public violence truly more terrifying than silent manipulation? Pablo Escobar's Medellin was a drug empire that dominated the 1980s, controlling up to 80% of the global cocaine market. But it was also a true terrorist organization. When the Colombian government considered extraditing Escobar to the US, he responded with immediate violence. The bombing of Avianca Flight 203 in 1989 was proof, a commercial airliner blown up midair simply because Escobar believed an enemy was on board. Over 100 innocent people perished. But this was just a small part of Medellin's campaign of terror. Escobar didn't just kill his enemies, he eliminated anyone who stood in his way, from police officers to politicians, from journalists to judges. The Sinaloa cartel does not operate like that. Instead of engaging in open warfare with the government, they choose a different path, controlling the government from within. They don't need to kill hundreds of police officers like Medellin. Instead, they bribe police commanders, turning them into allies. They don't need to bomb a government building because they can rewrite laws to work in their favor. This is the most crucial difference between the two cartels. Medellin wields destruction, while Sinaloa wields control. But is control more terrifying than destruction? That is not an easy question to answer. A bullet to the head can kill a person, but money can turn an enemy into an ally. Medellin made its enemies fear them, but Sinaloa made its enemies submit. Medellin killed a police officer, but Sinaloa turned the police into part of their system. Imagine being a police officer in Medellin in 1989. You have a choice: accept Escobar's bribe or die. Some chose death, but many chose the money. In Sinaloa, your choices are not as clear. You may never receive a direct threat, but one day, you realize your colleagues are working for the cartel. You are not forced to join, but you know that if you refuse, your career might be over. Or worse, you might disappear without a trace. So, which form of violence is more terrifying? A cartel that will kill anyone in its way, or a cartel that can manipulate an entire system from within? If Medellin existed in a world where the strongest survived, Sinaloa exists in a world where the smartest never need to fight directly. But violence is not just a tool for control, it is also a form of punishment. What happens when a cartel member betrays the organization? Medellin would kill them immediately, publicly, to send a message. Sinaloa, however, would not kill them right away, they would prolong the suffering, turning death into a living warning. If Medellin is a cold-blooded killer, then Sinaloa is a methodical torturer. But what is truly more terrifying? Someone who shoots you instantly or someone who makes you live in fear every day, waiting for the moment you are found? The battle between Medellin and Sinaloa is not just a war between two cartels but a war between two forms of violence. One is open terrorism, the other is silent control. One burns bright like fire, the other smolders like embers waiting to ignite. The question is not who is stronger, but who can last longer. So, if you had to live under the control of a cartel, would you choose Medellin, where death comes swiftly but openly, or Sinaloa, where you may live, but always in fear? In the next part, we will dive deeper into how these two cartels confronted the government. Was Medellin's public violence or Sinaloa's political manipulation more effective? The story is far from over, because what comes next will be even more astonishing. Imagine you are a police officer in Colombia in 1989. Every day you go to work, you don't know if you will return home. Not because of an accident, not because of an unsolvable case, but because out there, an organization has placed a bounty on your head. Any thug with a cheap pistol could make a fortune just by killing you. That's how Pablo Escobar's Medellin cartel operates, a direct war against the government. With no rules, no exceptions, a world where law no longer exists, leaving only one question: which side are you on? But if you were a police officer in Mexico today, the situation would not be the same. No one has placed a price on your life, and there are no public bombings in broad daylight. Yet, you know the cartel's control is still present. You don't see violence, but you feel it everywhere. In the hushed conversations between high-ranking officers, in the unsolved murders that never receive a proper investigation, in the way drug traffickers always seem to know police raid schedules in advance. In Medellin, you could be killed for opposing the cartel. In Sinaloa, you could become part of it without even realizing it. When Medellin wanted to control the government, they did so through force. They bombed police headquarters, killed judges, and assassinated presidential candidates in the middle of their campaigns. They didn't need negotiations, they didn't need to hide. If a law threatened them, they killed the person who wrote it. If a politician refused their money, he would die in his seat at the legislature. Escobar once said, "Plata o plomo, silver or lead?" If you didn't take his money, you took his bullets. A simple question, but so effective that almost no one could refuse. Sinaloa is different. They don't kill politicians, they fund them. They don't bomb government buildings, they build relationships inside them. They don't need to force anyone because when a system is already rotten from within, all they need to do is buy the person at the top. When a new law is passed, you can never be sure if it was written in favor of the cartel. When a governor is elected, you can't be certain whether he serves the government or the cartel. This is the fundamental difference between Medellin and Sinaloa. One uses violence to intimidate. The other uses power to manipulate. Which method is more effective? Medellin once controlled all of Colombia through sheer violence. But in the end, Escobar was hunted down and killed on the rooftop of his own hideout. But what about Sinaloa? El Chapo Guzman was captured, but the cartel still stands. The Mexican government once tried to arrest his son, Ovidio Guzman, but what happened next? Hundreds of Sinaloa gunmen flooded Culiacan, turning the streets into a war zone. The Mexican army was overwhelmed. Civilians panicked, and in the end, the government was forced to release Ovidio Guzman to avoid a bloodbath. A government can kill a man, but how can it kill an organization that has rooted itself deep within society? If Medellin represents open warfare, then Sinaloa represents sustainable domination. One cartel was labeled the government's #1 enemy, the other can make the government submit. Medellin could make the authorities fear them, but Sinaloa can make the authorities work for them. The real question is, which is truly more powerful? An organization that spreads absolute terror or one that manipulates even those in the highest positions of power? But power doesn't just come from guns or money. It lies in how a cartel controls its own members. What happens when a member of Medellin or Sinaloa betrays the organization? Medellin would kill them immediately. In public, sending a message to everyone. A bullet to the head in the middle of the street. A corpse hanging from a bridge. A bomb detonating in a trader's home. Medellin wants the world to see their punishment because public fear is a powerful weapon. Sinaloa, on the other hand, is different. If Medellin kills you instantly, Sinaloa wants you to know you will die, but not when. A traitor might be kidnapped and tortured for days before being executed. They might be forced to record a final message to their family before being decapitated. They might be dissolved in acid, buried alive, or burned to ashes, but more importantly, they disappear. No one knows what happened to them. No body is ever found. No public warning is given. Medellin kills to make a statement. Sinaloa kills to create invisible fear. So, which is more terrifying? A bullet that ends everything instantly? Or a slow, painful death where fear consumes you before death arrives? Medellin shows you the consequences immediately. But Sinaloa makes you live with the dread every single day, never knowing when your time will come. One cartel kills in front of everyone. The other kills without a trace. In the end, true power does not lie in violence or fear, but in control. Medellin could dominate a city with bombings and assassinations. But Sinaloa controls an entire nation through money and political influence. One seizes power with guns. The other buys it. One was destroyed. The other still thrives. If Medellin was the symbol of unchecked brutality, then Sinaloa is the perfect model of a modern criminal empire, where violence doesn't need to be displayed, only whispered in the dark. So, if you had to choose, would you live under Medellin's rule, where death comes swiftly and openly? Or under Sinaloa, where you may survive, but forever live in fear of disappearing? Is open violence truly more terrifying than silent control? Or is manipulation the most dangerous weapon of all? Imagine you are a traitor. It doesn't matter why. You may have stolen money. You may have talked to the police. Or maybe someone in the cartel simply suspects that you are no longer loyal. You might not know you've been marked, but everyone else does. The way they look at you changes. Conversations fall silent when you approach. And then one day, you disappear. No trace, no warning. One moment, you're still part of the cartel. The next, you become a lesson for others. But how that lesson unfolds depends on who you betrayed. If you were a traitor in the Medellin cartel, death would come swiftly. A bullet to the head in the middle of the street. A car bomb, or a man appearing at your doorstep and shooting you in front of your family. Medellin doesn't care if you suffer. They only care about sending a message. A corpse on the street isn't just a murder, it's a warning. When one person is killed, hundreds of others understand that no one betrays Escobar. Medellin doesn't bother hiding it. They want the whole world to know that betrayal means death. But if you betrayed the Sinaloa cartel, death wouldn't come immediately. They wouldn't kill you in the street because a quick death is a mercy. They want you to know you are going to die. But they want you to feel every second of that fear. Maybe you're kidnapped while driving home. Maybe you're drugged and wake up in a dark room, with only a chair and a few men waiting for you. They don't kill you right away. They ask you a few questions. But the answers don't matter. What matters is the fear in your eyes. They want you to beg, to regret, to realize that you made the wrong choice. Sinaloa's methods of torture aren't just about killing, they're about making others afraid. Some have their fingers cut off one by one, their tongues cut out so they can't speak, their skin peeled off to prolong the agony. Others are burned alive or thrown into vats of acid, their bodies dissolving until nothing remains. But death isn't just a punishment, it's a message. Videos of the torture spread within the cartel, showing everyone what happens if they betray. No warnings, no speeches, just a single image, a traitor sobbing, begging before being beheaded, a warning that no one dares to forget. So what's more terrifying, a bullet in the street or a slow death in the shadows? Medellin kills you instantly, but Sinaloa makes you die in terror. One cartel wants the world to see its brutality, while the other spreads fear without ever showing its face. One uses violence as a public spectacle, the other wields it as a tool of psychological control. And the question remains, which method is truly more effective? But death is only part of the story. What happens after is just as important. Medellin leaves bodies in the streets. But Sinaloa makes traitors disappear. No evidence, no funerals, no stories to tell, just silence. One day, someone is simply gone, and no one asks why. No one searches, no one investigates, because everyone already knows the answer. Yet the cartel's power doesn't come only from punishment, it comes from control. Money is their ultimate weapon. Medellin spent millions bribing police, politicians, even government officials. Escobar once offered to pay off Colombia's national debt just to have his extradition order cancelled. With billions of dollars per year, Medellin could buy anyone. But there was a problem. Escobar's money could only buy loyalty for a short time. When he became the government's #1 enemy, all those who once served him turned against him. Sinaloa is different. They don't just bribe individuals, they build an entire system. Not just a few high-ranking officials, but an entire network: police, military, judges, and even legitimate businesses. They don't need another Escobar, because they don't rely on one leader. If a boss gets arrested, the cartel continues as usual. If a corrupt official is exposed, they simply replace him with someone else. A system with no weak points, no central power to destroy. So in the end, what truly makes a cartel unstoppable? Is it Medellin's public violence or Sinaloa's hidden control? Can a cartel rule a country through street executions? Or is it better to manipulate the government without anyone realizing it? Medellin once terrorized Colombia, but in the end, Escobar was killed. Sinaloa has survived for decades, even after its leader was arrested, and continues to grow. One burned everything down until it self-destructed. The other quietly controls from within, ensuring it never falls. If you were part of this world, which path would you choose? Would you seek power in a cartel that kills anyone who stands in its way? Or would you become part of an organization where power isn't in the hands of a gun, but in carefully built connections? Do you want to live in a cartel that terrifies the world? Or one that makes the world work for it without even knowing? Medellin or Sinaloa? Which is truly the greatest criminal empire? Imagine yourself sitting in a bar in Mexico, a glass of liquor in hand, surrounded by men in crisp dress shirts, gold rings gleaming under the dim lights. They speak softly, laughing casually, but you know that each one of them carries a fearsome reputation in the underworld. They don't need to boast. They don't need to threaten, because their power doesn't come from the gun on the table, but from the phone calls that can change a person's fate in an instant. This isn't Medellin. This is Sinaloa, where power isn't measured by the number of people they kill, but by the number of people they control. If Medellin was a raging fire, then Sinaloa is a silent but unstoppable current. When Escobar was alive, he was the center of everything. But when he died, his cartel collapsed. But Sinaloa is different. When El Chapo Guzman was arrested, no one thought it was the end of the organization. He was just one piece of a much larger machine, a system too vast for anyone to fully control. The Mexican government can capture a man, but how can they capture an entire network that has embedded itself into every layer of society? Sinaloa's money isn't hidden in filthy warehouses or buried underground like Medellin once did. They launder their profits through legitimate businesses, investing in real estate, restaurants, and even the tech industry. A portion of Mexico's economy, even the US economy, is running on that dirty money. You could buy a house without knowing the money that built it came from drugs. You could dine in a restaurant without realizing it's part of a massive laundering operation. If Medellin controlled the world through violence, then Sinaloa controls it by infiltrating every corner of the economy. But if money is power, violence is still a necessary weapon. No underworld organization can survive without fear. Medellin instilled fear through public bombings, massacres that threw all of Colombia into chaos. Sinaloa instills fear differently, an invisible fear, where their enemies don't know when or how they will be dealt with. Some are kidnapped, tortured, and taken somewhere they never return from. Others wake up one day to find that their loved ones have disappeared without a trace. This is how Sinaloa maintains power, not through public wars, but through warnings that no one sees yet everyone understands. If Medellin is a storm, then Sinaloa is an earthquake shifting everything beneath the surface. When a storm comes, you know it's there. You see its destruction, but an earthquake is different. You don't hear it, you don't see it, but one day, a building collapses, and no one knows what caused it. Medellin spreads fear with bodies in the streets, but Sinaloa makes you fear them through their silence. But the question is, which method is truly more effective? Medellin did not last, but its violence made the world tremble. Sinaloa has survived for decades, but can its power last forever? A cartel built on public violence can be destroyed, but a cartel that operates in the shadows is nearly impossible to erase. A government can fight an enemy it can see, but how can they fight an invisible force? And if one day you found yourself trapped between these two forces, which would you choose? Would you rather live in a world where death can come instantly? Or a world where you might live but never know when you will disappear? A cartel that kills you for all to see? Or a cartel that erases you so thoroughly no one even asks where you went? And what's truly more terrifying, a bullet in the street? Or a death so carefully orchestrated that you never had a chance to resist? Two forces, two strategies, but only one goal: absolute power. One burns everything down only to collapse upon itself, while the other infiltrates the system to ensure eternal survival. Medellin or Sinaloa? Which is truly the most terrifying criminal empire? Which method of killing is more ruthless? Controlling through guns, or controlling through money? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this video intriguing, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next deep dive into the underworld.